Okay, so now we have a panel session, and so perhaps I'll ask the panelists to come up. I think I will perhaps ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and just say a few words about what they think and why they're here, and then we'll have hopefully a debate with questions from the floor. And Courtney, you steer me if you think we're going in the wrong direction. So perhaps we'll have John Webster. Do you want to?
Right, thank you. John Webster, economist and businessman. I've been on the island since '76. I was chief economic advisor. I left, set up my own businesses, and I have been involved in probably 8 or 9 startups since then. What do I think was the next question. I think this morning identifies one of the areas where the island was weak, but now has a great opportunity. And the weakness we always had when I was trying to develop the island as an economic advisor was our remoteness. A lot of things that have been said today indicate that that is less of a problem now than it has ever been. One simple example is the transportation of human tissue. Used to be 2 hours, now it's a couple of days. Another is telemedicine. One of the problems we have in developing a biomed center is the fact that we are remote from centers of learning excellence. We are remote from good hospitals. One of the advantages the island has developed over the last few years, because of e-gaming, is a fantastically robust system of data storage, management, transmission, and security. These are really excellent base levels of opportunity for the island to overcome some of the problems we had and to develop some of the advantages that we've always had, which is basically great quality of living, so the entrepreneur and his staff can be here in a secure environment, and also it's a wonderful business environment. And I think you've seen all the statistics to show that. Is that enough?
That's a very good start. I'm sure we'll return to that in more detail. All right, so Paul Neville.
I'm a patent attorney, and I'm not an expert in pharma or agrichem, but I've spent 35 years in the innovation field, and we acted, and I have acted for some fairly large names in those fields. I'm here really because of my enthusiasm for innovation, which sounds odd, but that's, I suppose, why I became a patent attorney in the first place. I got bored with being a patent agent who sat somewhere in a room drafting little pieces of paper, mostly for nothing, because, as has already been said, most of these inventions come to nothing. So I started getting involved in syndicating inventions and putting money and people together, and slowly evolved, I would say, away from the backroom stuff into commercializing invention and innovation, which is almost exclusively what I do today. So that's really my enthusiasm for the subject matter at all, but also because this is one of those key opportunities for the Isle of Man to survive the next wave of the anti-offshore onslaught. It is quite clear that being a low-tax jurisdiction will be tolerated if you are low tax within a certain realm that is regulated, that you're not seen to be harmful. But the next wave, apart from the low tax and the transparency, is going to be country by country reporting. It's going to be the allocation of profits according to economic value. These are things ultimately that are not that far away, and it's high time that we started debating these things and getting our heads around them. It does mean that the Isle of Man is going to have to be able to compete by simply placing high-value components right here on the ground with jobs and real economic activity. And that is going to attract business here, and because of the lower tax component, you're going to attract the higher value components that are small by way of their size, but have high economic value. And this industry that we're sitting here listening to this morning is a perfect example of exactly that.
Very good. John O'Driscoll.
Hi, my name is John O'Driscoll. I have a company, Highland Scientific, that has just moved to the island. So we make our primary business is to coat the inside of oil and gas pipes with diamond-like carbon. And the reason I'm here today is you can use diamond-like carbon because it is biocompatible, and there is a possibility of having things like hip joints coated, instead of, at the moment they're coated with titanium nitride, but there's a possibility of having them coated with diamond-like carbon. But as in the process of moving to the island, we've moved different new technologies, which is sputtering, the diamond-like carbon, as I say, and also the titanium nitride. So if somebody needs to practice on having an item coated for the medical business, certainly you can come out and put it in one of the machines, and where we go. So I'm not actually biomedical. I like it, and I'll support the sector as much as I can, and support Courtney, of course, as much as I can. Okay, that's me.
Okay, so I think everybody in this room would like to see the Isle of Man become a centre, become a cluster, and as I said earlier, I have seen this happen in reality in Oxford. I mean, Oxford has been just transformed in the last 30 years. 30 years ago, when I had my first little seed fund, and I went to see the professor of engineering at Oxford, and it was my old school. I read engineering at Oxford, so I might have expected a sympathetic hearing. And I said, listen, I've got some money, and can I come and talk to your researchers? And maybe if some of them have got an interesting idea, I could invest in them and we could create a business. And he said, certainly not. He said, Oxford is a place of education. We don't want any business around here. Go away. It was really hostile. And that is completely changed now. There are now, the university employs 80 people in ISIS Innovation, and they go and talk to academics, and there are 2,300 scientific academics just in the university alone, and that's not the only thing in Oxfordshire. And they make sure they file patents before they publish, and the whole thing is it has really worked. And another big problem in the old days was you couldn't get a place to rent. If you wanted to start a business, you had to sign a 25-year lease. And I mean, anything more inappropriate for a startup technology business, it's hard to imagine. And now, just one example, I work in a building on the Oxford Science Park. It's got 40 technology startups in that one building alone, and we all rent space by the month. So, you know, every month, if your business is doing well, you can double in size, or you can leave, and there are no penalties. Anyway, so I have seen the whole cluster work, and once it begins to reach a certain scale, it becomes self-fueling. Because then you've got successful companies, and they ring up their friends and say, come and work here. We're looking for other people. And in my building, we have, everybody eats together at lunchtime, and there's a lot of, all these Venn diagrams, and they all overlap. And there's this great dialogue that goes on, and ideas get created, and businesses get created, and it all works because of scale. And I guess, but it's very difficult to start when you've got nothing, and to get the first companies to come, and I guess it would need support from the government, sustained support over a number of years to make it work. Easy to talk about, probably quite difficult to achieve. So now, Susan.
Yes, sorry.
Susan Greenfield.
Susan Greenfield, I'm an inventor-scientist category. Yeah.
Also a member of the House of Lords.
Thank you. I just want to follow on from what Lucius said about Oxford, where I'm actually based, because without challenging you too much, as a grassroots scientist, I have to say my experiences are not quite as happy. And therefore, I'm just like to address the panel. Take me as a typical inventor-scientist. When I was initially working with the technology transfer company, ISIS at Oxford, I learnt to my alarm that if they have an exclusive license, you get 15% as the inventor, they take 85%. Yeah. this has actually encouraged me to strike out into the private sector. Now, it strikes me that the one thing that's been missing from what you're saying and from what we've been hearing is you need people like me, scientists, and the intellectual kind of hub, the inventors, somehow to come as well and to be some kind of group, not all the time, but just somehow to be a force there intellectually. Is there any ideas that you have to take someone like me who's very disillusioned by my wonderful university that you've heard about, but nonetheless I think is actually doing me down? Is there something you could offer me as I stand here disillusioned by Oxford?
Yes. Can I see you later? I think the key attribute of most speakers and most people who are scientists or specialists in any area is that they tend to be very focused on that area. And I think there are two elements which are important. One, corporate loneliness. It's very important that you can associate, bounce ideas, etc., of your peers, people who understand what you're talking about. Secondly, for any successful business, you need a range of activities and a range of skills, from marketing to finance to simple things like where you're putting the office, who's going to do the IT. What the Isle of Man has is an infrastructure which has learned how to handle the finance and to encourage small businesses to develop. They're fostered by the government, and that combination of specialist skills, support by the government, and a range of support activities readily available, particularly aimed at small and medium companies, because large companies don't fit that well on the Isle of Man. That is how I would sell that to you. And I mentioned earlier the quality of life. It's very important that the people with the business and their senior managers feel comfortable here, they're secure here, they're not taxed that much here. And as you heard from Greg earlier, there's no capital gains tax, which is a very important element, particularly if you have a startup company with IP, which may get value, which subsequently you may wish to realise without being taxed.
But in the UK, there is mostly no capital gains tax either now, because there are the enterprise investment scheme and the venture capital trusts and things all have that feature in common. So it's, you know,
I didn't realise we had competition from the UK.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but I mean, I think the Isle of Man is going to have to do more than just offer capital gains. You know, no capital gains tax. I mean, seriously, if you want to get people to come, I don't think that will be enough, because it's easy to structure a company now in the UK that has no capital gains tax.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. That wasn't the focal point of what I said.
No, well, I was just thinking of why is Susan going to move to the Isle of Man?
I don't have to move, just an intellectual hub, something
Right.
that actually gets me to talk to people
But I mean,
who could help.
the Isle of Man wants people to move, yes. You want real jobs, and you want companies to form here. And how are you going to achieve that?
I think what we actually want are people to do business on the island, personally, through the island, or in some way utilising the services of the island. There are three aspects. And what I was trying to do was indicate that the island is good both for residents, for the individual entrepreneur and the senior staff, and also a great business location for anyone who wants to establish a small business and grow it here.
Okay. All right. Any more questions? Yes.
I'll just make one comment. Don't forget inheritance tax either. That's a huge factor.
Ah, right. Do you want to expand on that a bit? For those of us who...
Have it in the Isle of Man.
No? Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think, again, the UK, there's no inheritance tax on the EIS scheme. After 2 years, your investments get outside it. So, again, I think that the sort of pure tax angle seems to me anyway, it's not going to be enough to persuade people to come to the island. Sorry?
It's tax angle for the individual, not the company.
Yes.
So if you become wealthy on the Isle of Man, as an inventor, you will be able to present more of your own personal wealth in terms of your inheritance passing on to your family and children.
Yes.
Could I just say a final word on this? We are not selling the Isle of Man on the basis of taxation.
Yeah.
We're promoting the Isle of Man with a package of attractions, both for the business and the individual. The benign tax climate, both for business and an individual, is a helpful backcloth to the other opportunities. The Island Man no longer aspires to be an international finance centre. We are clearly an international business centre. We have over 200 tangible, operating, manufacturing and like companies on the island. Some, for example, Swagelock, have better productivity than their equivalents in China. So the quality here, they make aeronautical parts. So the quality, the history is such that the Isle of Man has a diversified business base, which is not, and certainly not, based on taxation. So just clarifying that point.
Yes.
Hi, Fareed Khan. Just to add a little bit more to that, but perhaps a future direction could be some sort of innovation funding. So in the United Kingdom, you have the Technology Strategy Board, and they seed ideas which can fundamentally change what they call disruptive technologies. And that could be quite an attractive sort of funding scheme. So over the last 2 years, we've secured about £1.5 million in 2 years from the UK government on various ideas, and they've gone to the next stage. So much so that some parts of the technologies are bought by large companies, even pharma, Philips, and various other things. And I think that could be something quite attractive.
That is something that's done already by government, and there are a number of private sector investors. So, yeah, thank you, and maybe that's something we should focus on this sector, which clearly has a good future ahead of it. Thank you for that, Larry.
So would you, as the government, be able to invest in some of the companies who have presented here this morning if they were to move to the Isle of Man, or is that too much to ask?
Can I correct you again?
Yeah.
I'm not part of the government.
No, okay, well,
but I'm sure the government does invest and will look at this type of thing,
yeah,
because it's quite obvious the government is financing this particular conference, so it has given its full support behind biomedicine. There's no question about that.
Well, as a new arrival, I will back up everything you say. Before I arrived, two words that I believe didn't go into the same sentence well were friendly and government. I come here, they're so helpful, and everybody has been so helpful. The quality of life that you mentioned earlier, absolutely fantastic. People say hello to you in the street if you don't get the hello in first, so it's got a lot going for it.
Very good. Yes, Courtney.
Can I reinforce John's point? There is another way to do this, and I again pick up on Baroness Greenfield. I bought a company here effectively, or me and another guy moved here at nil value. We exploited the initial excitement here, raised money on Ireland, nearly 7 figures, and then we got 7 figures out of the British government under TSB. So having these different jurisdictions that work, that are within the law, there are some creative guys in this room who can structure this. You don't always have to move. Some of us moved here for lifestyle, and one guy actually won races here 30 years ago. But the business now is centred around the UK and exports to India. The Isle of Man is great at nil value when you move here. And by the way, we all work for our government about 15, maybe 20% of the year. My friends in London work for 40 to 45% of the year and still moan. I think we've got a better deal.
Very good. Okay. Here's a question on...
Hi, it's Nick Nikitsin, Ruslan Clinical Research. So I think it's been...
Can you say who you were again?
Nick Nikitsin, Ruslan Clinical Research. Yeah. So it's been about 12 months now since the start of this initiative, ManxBioMed, and I think we have achieved a lot. But what I think it's time now to try and think about what should be the focus area for the Isle of Man within this huge ManxBioMed arena.
Yes.
What we probably should try and come up with some kind of mission statement for the Isle of Man. So, for example, in my line of business, I spend some time on the Isle of Man, but I also travel the world and I meet hundreds of biotech and medtech companies. So I want to have like a mission statement, maybe from all of us, from the ManxBioMed, supported by the government, so we can articulate to these potential partners who may wish to come and base themselves here on the Isle of Man. So the list of achievements and with a specific focus on the
So you think biomed is too large?
Yeah, it's obviously
you need
too
to have
large.
Yes,
Yeah.
you need to have a... So do you have some suggestions?
It's difficult to say. I think Courtney has mentioned a few times that medical devices may be a good focus area within the Isle of Man. I think Jim mentioned today also in his presentation that not every business model is suitable for the island. So again, we need to think at certain businesses who utilize this model, for example, when they can establish themselves here on the Isle of Man from start, so that they can get access to all the possible advantages of the island. So basically, it's an open question to everyone who participates in ManxBioMed and to all the guests who can give their suggestions how ManxBioMed should continue from here, how we should make a more focused statement, like mission statement for ManxBioMed, and what should we who promote the island outside the island, what should we tell to potential businesses who may consider coming and relocating to the island or establishing some presence here.
Am I right in thinking that Courtney would be the focus of,
yes,
of this?
most definitely, yes.
You probably need one person who can say what you think should happen and get everybody to follow along.
Yep.
Yes, Courtney.
But I defer to Nick and experts like that, and Jim. Some of the insights, Baroness Greenfield, have got world-class insights. We're very good on data and devices. We have world-class communications off the island. Manx Telecom are sponsoring us today, and we can make devices for aerospace and space and implants. Those may be the start, but there'll be expertise here. Telemedicine, I'm convinced, is going to happen. There is the capability with a Swedish lady who has a house in Port Erin, and she is looking at radiological images, neck and brain in Port Erin. You know, that's not New York, it's Port Erin, it's going on now. I think that's some of the thing that will expand. Data and devices will be the first two.
Very good. Okay, anything else? Yes, so two more. Yeah, have you first, and then
Okay.
further back. Yes.
Well, I think it would be very interesting if we could get the Isle of Man Health Service involved in this as well, because that would give us a clear benefit for some of the companies that are coming here to look at the UK market, because they have very interesting clinical links. And I do feel it's a very strong support from the DED and the politicians, but maybe not so much contact with the various people at the hospital.
Is there anybody here from the hospital? No. So that maybe sends a signal.
I can speak from experience. The hospital service on the Isle of Man is, I guess, like any other centrally organised health service. It's very reluctant to look at new forms of treatment. And I've had 4 or 5 occasions when we banged our heads against a door which hasn't opened up at the hospital here.
Well, there's a problem that needs solving.
Yes.
So the question two rows back.
Edward Sparks. Thank you very much for the panel's comments. One of the things that I've noticed in the years where I've been coming to the Isle of Man is that you seem to have the opposite of what's commonly referred to as an island mentality. You're as outward looking as it's possible to be. And there's an extremely high concentration of global entrepreneurs, global business people, and global expertise in a very concentrated area. And I think that's what the Isle of Man needs to sell, if you like, to those scientists and those entrepreneurs who are probably in the UK and around Europe, that the Isle of Man is a springboard to global sales and global products. And you've got the expertise, particularly in those individuals, not necessarily in corporations, not sitting in large offices, but individuals here who've got both the expertise, the track record, and, to be blunt, the money to assist some of those fledgling businesses. And I think Courtney's been working extremely hard over recent years. I think there needs to be some appreciation of that from those wealthy individuals on the island to actually just come up with a bit more cash for some of these early stage businesses alongside their expertise.
And do you think there needs to be a mechanism to facilitate that?
I think
which happened everywhere now, but in Oxford now there's this thing called Onion, which is the local business angels network, and it met for more than 20 years now, and every 4 or 5 weeks it meets, and companies give pitches, and there are probably 100 people in the room, of whom 50 are investors. And it's a very simple mechanism, but it really works well, and companies do raise money. And I imagine one could have the same kind of thing going on in the Isle of Man with these, but you need to have a sort of mechanism to enable all these good ideas to happen. And maybe that's something the government could facilitate.
I agree. A combination of those business angels and then potentially some of the financial institutions putting a small percentage of their, and I understand a lot of them are risk averse, but a small percentage of those funds alongside the
and I think gatherings like this fulfill a terrific function by just getting everybody to meet each other, and out of this I'd be surprised if there aren't some actual tangible things, businesses arise and so on. Okay, there was a question there. Yes.
Yeah, it's a comment related to the other gentleman's comment. But one of the opportunities the island has got is to look at why companies haven't thrived in the startup environment elsewhere. So lots of things have been attempted, but they've not all necessarily worked. And picking up on the point that was just made, being able to foster companies and provide a lot of expertise in a very flexible manner when they're starting up, not just rent and space. I think that's a very tired old classic bio-incubator model.
Yeah, but it's very important.
It's very important.
But it's not hard to solve, and it mostly has been solved,
Yeah, exactly. And what you find, especially in the UK, are a lot of companies which are very comfortable being 3 people, and they'll stay being 3 people until one of them dies, and then they'll be 2 people. They're certainly not going to grow into thriving, successful companies. Their products are not going to go anywhere. And I think if you are able to really hallmark the offering here, to emphasize that companies might even be pre-screened before you would even consider investing in them and giving them a home here, and making certain services and support available to them, I could see that being very successful. If companies then get here and see that there's a route to growth, a route to markets, a route to thrive, basically, that would be a massive fillip to this whole sector. So I think that's a great opportunity. It's almost like not doing what everybody else has done.
Very good. Yes?
I might be viewed as having some vested interest here, but having spoke previously, but I would just like to follow on from that. You've got the most important thing, money. Right?
Yes.
I've been looking for funding in gambling taxing for the last 3 years in the UK. I have had absolutely no interest whatsoever. It is impossible to raise funds in the UK.
It is very difficult.
And the biggest asset that you guys have got is simply money, but you've got to unlock that.
Yeah. Just speaking as an investor myself, it is very difficult. I get approached by 2,000 people every year wanting funds, and I can make about 5 or 6 investments per year in these startups. So seen from the perspective of the funders, it's a very difficult problem. Yes.
I would say maybe does that pose a corollary question, which is if the money is looser on the Isle of Man, does that run the risk that we make worse investment decisions than you do?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing, obviously, I don't know why I'm talking, it shouldn't be me talking, but I mean, it's the key thing is who is going to control the money and decide, in which businesses to invest and in which businesses not to invest. And however you do that, you can't please all the people. And I don't know what, maybe Courtney has to be given a couple of million and to not me, all right? But somebody's got to do it. If you do it by committee, it's almost guaranteed to fail. So somebody has got to take charge and be given the money, and the government have to take some risk on them. Or maybe it's done by a tax incentive to investors, which is the trend in the UK is that the government has made these very generous tax incentives for investors, and then the investors take the decisions, and the individual investors, and that works pretty well because the investors are keen to see that they get a return on their money, and they take great interest and choose very carefully.
Sometimes tax investments distort behaviours. I like management by scarcity.
Certainly.
I've suffered from it for a number of years,
Yeah.
but it does teach you discipline. I'd like to say that this should be business people driving this.
Yes.
In the incubation stage, you're growing a little plant, you're not pulling it up to look at it, you're watering it, nurturing it, and that stage doesn't need professional fund managers so small. I think the next stage is where they can add value, management skills, but the early stage, if it's a committee, to me, it'll just die.
Quite. Maybe Jim would be the person.
Yeah.
And we need a brave person to stand up. Okay, well, are there more questions, more points anybody like to make?
Yes.
Yes?
Is it on? Yes. Hi, Lauren Johnson, San Francisco and the Isle of Man.
Right.
Jim mentioned earlier today that we are a hotbed of biotechnology out in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And my own experience, it's been 24 years since we started our company, but my own experience as an entrepreneur before we had any investment of any kind was we could finance some of it until we had to pay for outside legal expenses, patent attorneys, accounting systems. We could work out of our house. We licensed a drug out of the house. But what really helped was when we had to form an actual company, there was an allied system of legal, accounting, patents, and it's been profitable enough in Silicon Valley that these companies actually donate their services until you have money. Then you pay them. When you go public, they are the ones you use. They make money off your IPO.
Right.
So it's not just the investors that are making money and the entrepreneurs, but the allied services are actually investing in the startup company. Now, how does an entrepreneur find those companies? Well, if they were to come to the Isle of Man and there's a defined organization like a cluster, and Courtney says, I know a lawyer you can go to, and they won't bill you until you've got your investment, you'll probably stay with them.
Yeah.
The accountants were really nice to us. They gave us lunch. The lawyers, we had to steal yellow pads from their office for our office. But I guess my point is it was a lot easier with the allied services on board and acting essentially as investors of their time in the very critical early stage when even the entrepreneur's money out of their pocket needed to go not to legal bills, but to getting their product moved.
Yes.
So I just like.
So it seems, I mean, all these good ideas need putting together, don't they, into some package which can then be presented to the outside world, so that people can make a sort of. So it's your thing. You need a mission statement, backed up by appendices of all these things which the benefits you can derive from coming to the Isle of Man.